And I'm going to transition that over. And I'm going to mute one of you so that it doesn't echo. And it looks like
we're live.
And the audio should be good. Hi, everybody. Hey, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. You tweeted?
I did, and tagged you.
Did you tag me? Good. All right. Oh, there it is. Retweet.
Yeah, now why isn't my channel hosting?
Oh.
There we go.
So how we doing, y'all?
Good.
I can make no complaints.
I mean, I'm sure you could.
I could complain, but no.
Can I complain about the fact that I have like 6 things going on, and for some reason, every single one of those separate people decided that my due date was March 15th? Like, I have everything is due on March 15th. I have everything due in like a week. And,
That's pretty typical,
yeah. And
right?
I'm giving a talk. I was asked by an organization at my college to give a talk and it happens to be on the evening of the 15th, so I have to. Luckily, I was worried about like, okay, do I have enough expertise to talk about this thing for an hour? And then they're like, well, usually it's like 20 minutes of talking and then 20 minutes of Q&A and then we're done. And I'm like, oh, I've been teaching long enough. I could introduce myself for 20 minutes. Like this is not difficult.
Right.
So, I mean, teaching and podcasting long enough that you know we're real good at filling time, right?
Awesome.
Okay. All right, I'm ready.
You ready?
Yeah.
I checked the audio. It all sounded good.
You're hosting things.
Yeah. Screw it. I'm not worried about it.
You're
It's supposed to automatically host you, and when I went to my channel, it doesn't look like it is, but whatever, it's fine.
Mine's
I never
okay.
did figure out.
I don't know. It doesn't really do much though, because nobody gets alerted on my channel that we're doing it on the other channel anday, and it's not like people are just sitting there hanging out.
Well,
yeah.
I don't know.
Whatever.
But here's what I can tell you: when Mike
Shea,
i.e. Sly Flourish, hosts the stream, we get a larger audience.
Do you? Okay.
I don't know if it's because you're tweeting about it and you have a bigger following.
I also tweet about it and talk about it on my
but...
Discord. Yeah. So that could help. But
yeah, I should tweet as well.
Given the normal amount of people that I have on my show, I know it's not alerting them.
Okay. Dar Jr. is here to keep time for us.
Yay! Good luck with that.
He's the one that
you're setting yourself up for failure
mocks
there.
us and makes fun of us when we go over. You know, and I'm gonna say it. I don't feel like I have a ton to talk about tonight. But
yeah, right.
Oh, famous last words.
We'll see how that goes. I mean, I jotted.
I, on the other hand,
I have like 2/3 of the notes I
do.
normally have. So.
Wow.
I don't know. Well, I mean,
I got so much frost maidening to talk about.
Okay. Well, should we go ahead and get going?
Sure.
All right. Let me.
Yep. I just tweet.
Go through my various windows and figure out which one I need to hit record on. Okay. The nice thing about streaming it now is that if anything ever goes really horribly wrong and I don't get the audio, we can always pull the audio from the stream. So. All right, but we're recording now.
Awesome.
And we're streaming, and yeah. So we're ready to go.
Ready.
All right. Welcome to Behind the DM Screen. We are 3 DMs talking about our games and helping each other out. I am Jeff Greiner. Joining me tonight, as always, is, I don't know, Sam. Say hi.
Yes, Sam. and Mike Shea. Sly Flourish.
And Mike Shea. Sly Flourish is Mike Shea.
Hey, everybody. Hello, my friends.
So, we each get 15 minutes to ignore and talk about our games and
it's more what you'd call a guideline.
It's a suggestion.
Form of suggestion.
It's a little bit. I don't know if either of you have ever been to India, but I went to India several years ago, and it became a
Does this count as part of your time?
And it became abundantly clear to me at one point that in large chunks of that country, the lines in the roads are I mean, not even a suggestion. It's just sort of it's like the grid, on grid paper. Like, you don't have to follow it. Nothing's forcing you to. There's no reason you have to, but just so you have a frame of reference,
Yeah.
All right. Shall I start my time then? You want to hear about my games?
Okay. Sure. Yeah.
So I've started my time. So my adult Friday game, a campaign which I call Deep Darkness, because we started in Waterdeep and then went to Barovia. So that all made sense to me.
As one does.
When we last chatted, the party had gone chasing after one of the champions of the dark powers that had escaped from the Amber Temple when Barovia was brought back to the world. And that champion, that new dark power, is a little lich that you may have heard of named a Sararak.
Oh, that guy. He was one of the dark powers.
Well, no, he's one of the new champions. He's the champion of Tenebris, the dark power of lichdom. And so,
isn't Orcus the dark power of lichdom?
No, Orcus is demon lord of the undead.
I know, and I think liches owe their fealty to.
Yes, Orcus. But Orcus isn't a dark power. He's a demon lord. They're different.
Pardon me while I
pull out your monster manual.
Monster manual.
So in any case, the point being, it was a great excuse for me to pull in a completely different form of gaming and rip the Tomb of the Nine Gods out of Tomb of Annihilation and run that for them, without the weirdness of the transition from early Tomb of the Nine Gods into the dungeon. Going from the let's build our characters and explore things to die, right? They're a little bit higher level than I think the Tomb of the Nine Gods is supposed to finish at level 12, and they're all level 13 from the beginning of it. So, I'm hoping to discover that makes them a little more capable of getting through the dungeon. When we last chatted, they had just met some Flaming Fist a contingent outside because their commander, the Grand Duke, Older Ravengard, had been taken and was trapped down inside the dungeon. And they got to meet Liara Portier, and all of that is just cameos for future Descent into Avernus campaign, so they know sort of who these characters are. And then they sort of got through a little bit of the first level, found the secret door going down to the workroom, slaughtered Withers and the tomb dwarves, and so now there's nobody sort of maintaining the dungeon. Although I think last time when I mentioned that, I think Mike, I think it was Mike that had recommended, or mentioned Withers is dead. Okay, but no, he's not, right? Because he's Withers and he's undead, and
right.
When you are the minion of a Sararak, the greatest necromancer in the lore of the game, like, what is death?
Yeah, you don't just get killed. And also, it'd be great if you're alive, and he's like, yeah, unfortunately. Yeah. It's like the 15th time. Well, I was hoping maybe now.
But one of the early on in the campaign when they were in Waterdeep, and then I managed to continue it on through Barovia, I was writing newsletters. I was writing the Waterdeep Wazoo newsletter every week, and I was keeping up with that. And then we hit a spot where I was just either too busy or too mentally exhausted to bother anymore, so I stopped.
A lot of work. Yeah.
Well, and I've done it in previous campaigns. It's a lot of work, but they my previous campaigns only played once or twice a month, so it wasn't so bad. This group we play every week, and so it just eventually wore me out about halfway through Barovia. And part of it was because the reporter is running around in Barovia, but there's only so much traveling around and reporting that he can do, because it's Barovia. It doesn't make sense for him to just be wandering around in the woods and talking about things happening in places. So I stopped, but for this third act, this post Curse of Strahd act, I started doing monologues. I was actually inspired. I was listening to an actual play. I think it was Red Moon role playing. They ran Descent into Avernus, and I wanted to hear somebody else play it as I was running it for my children, just to see, what was their take on this? How did they do that? Sort of thing. And he was doing, it wasn't even really monologues. He was doing just little, I don't know, it might have just been like 1 to 3 sentences from some NPC as an introduction into each episode. And I'm like, that's kind of neat. And I turned it into like, now I'm writing, a 1.5 minute, 2-minute monologue from some NPC. That whereas the Wazoo was in character, like their characters were finding these newsletters laying around and reading them. This one is completely meta, right? Only the players know it, the NPCs, or the player characters don't. So like, one of them was they freed the genie. There's a Tao trapped inside of the Tomb of the Nine Gods. They freed it, and I decided, well, this will be kind of fun. The Tao's going to follow you around. It feels duty bound. It owes you some favors. 3 favors, basically, and the 3 favors were, not I'm going to fight for you, not I'm going to do whatever for you, but you can ask me for 3 favors involving me casting spells for you, based off of my spell list. Setting aside
it has some pretty beefy spells.
Well,
doesn't it?
Sure, except that they're like plane shift, which doesn't work in the tomb,
Oh,
or move earth, which doesn't work in the tomb. Stone shape,
and it's not one of the ones that wish. It doesn't do wishes.
And so they got to another point since we talked last, where there's this golden skull. And if you touch it, it floats around and follows you around and just pesters you and makes fun of you the whole time.
Yep.
And it gives you disadvantage on everything. And the only way to get rid of it is die or feed it 10,000 gold pieces worth of gems. That's a lot of gems, right? And they just spent like all their cash, so they don't have a lot.
Oh, you're like, I only eat Heroes Feast bowls.
Right.
Eat 10 Heroes Feast bowls.
And he's super honest with him. He just keeps following him around. How can we get rid of you? I told you, there's 2 ways to. And he's real sort of monotone, like bored, like he's clearly bored out of his skull with them, and that's how he makes fun. Oh yeah, you're gonna do this again. Well, that'll be a great success this time, but he's like, I keep telling you that there's only 2 ways you're gonna get rid of me. You're either gonna die, because I promise you'll die before I do, or you're gonna feed me enough gems to make me go away, right? So they said, one of the favors they asked for, the last favor they asked for from the Tao was, go get us a bunch of gems to feed this thing. And Keshma, that's the name of the Tao. Keshma's like, yeah, totally, I'll do that, no problem. Plane shift. Except plane shift doesn't work. If you try that kind of spell or teleport in the dungeon, it sends you to this room full of dead bodies. No, it sends you to the room full of dead bodies with the Odio swimming around in it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so they have no idea. They just know that she disappeared. They don't know where she went. And then I did a monologue the next week from her, like, well, that went really well. I went from being trapped in a bottle to being trapped in this room. I hope somebody frees me soon. I hope it's not those guys, because I'm not getting them gems anymore. I'm sick of this. So the players now know that Keshem is not coming back unless they do something dumb like teleport themselves, which they know doesn't work.
Right.
And they know because they've read Wither's journals, and they know all the ins and outs of how magic works, right? So, and then I did one with Belcor's, the Beholder, and they've gone through that level now, and they fought him and killed him. And they've actually gone through a lot. And now I'm getting to the level where things are starting to get, things are going to start getting rough soon. There's that one series of elemental room trap things, and that is like super. Like some of those are like, even at 13th level, like this is instant kill levels of damage. And so that is tricky. And then the other
Can I share a funny tale? So we had the one that's I think it's the fire one, where people have to go in and the door closes and they like they teleport out and then it opens and it looks like they've been burned to death. right? And people can only get one at a time. So everybody in my group just said one after the other, like, okay, I guess we're going in. And I never said what happened to the next guy.
Right.
I only kept saying, you open it up. And so they all went, like I think it was 5 out of 6 people went through, except the last guy was like, no, like everyone died. I'm not going in. I'm going in this room. And then he got Bodak. So he was the only one who actually died.
And that's the other room that.
It's because he tried taking on 3 Bodaks.
That's the other room I'm a little worried about is the Bodak room
Bodak room
not necessarily because
fun.
of the Bodaks. I think they'll be fine with the fight. The issue is that like you get sealed up in the place, and the only way to get out is cut off your own hand. That's the only way to open the doors is to remove one of your own limbs, and that's hardcore. Like that's old school D&D there.
Hey man. Yeah, they chose to go into this place. It's called, Tome of the... Well, it's not called Tome of the Nation, but they probably saw the cover of the book.
They're aware
right?
of the situation. But and
not Tome of Free Gemstones.
And now they're very much it's strange. They've gone from we're gonna run through things as quickly as possible through almost the entire campaign. Like they want to skip exploring and go for their target, right? Now all of a sudden they get to this place and they're like, well, no, we need to explore everything. And part of it's because like I'm putting, and this was, I think, a brilliant idea, is that I am putting all of the skeleton keys, not on just these random skeletons wandering around in various places. I'm putting them inside the tombs. Because otherwise you can completely skip the tombs, and that's no fun. Those are the fun traps,
Well, yeah.
I loved those skeleton keys.
Yeah, the nice, well, it's funny because they're skeletons with key heads.
Right.
But
also
the other thing
they're
is you
creepy,
can put them wherever
right?
you want. Yeah.
But they're creepy because they can they spider climb and stuff. So I used to have them like crawling all over the ceilings and running away from the characters anytime they came in the room.
Yeah, and I beefed them up. So I would change them out and like make, so one of them was a bone claw, right?
Yeah.
And you make them tougher versions. But the nice thing about them is you can put them anywhere you want. So you can pace the adventure by wherever you want to put
I'm basically
keys.
picking the tomb that I think is the most fun and sticking just the skull with the key thing inside the tomb with whatever else was supposed to be there, right? Or in the case of the Beholder, it was in the Beholder room, so you had to hunt all over to find all the keys to get into the Beholder. Otherwise, you can completely skip the Beholder. You can completely skip most of the
Beholder's
tombs.
badass too. Turns out invisible Beholders are really hard.
Well, here's the thing, and they learned their lesson because in the Strahd fight, they got their ass handed to him because he turned invisible and then cast a bunch of spells that weren't like direct attack spells. So he just stayed invisible the whole time, and it kicked their ass. And then afterwards, they're like, "Oh shit, we have a Lantern of Revealing. What the hell?" So in this case, the Beholder shows up, and it took them a round. But in the second round, they're like, we're using the Lantern this time. And then the Beholder became a whole different, much easier fight.
Right.
That said, then later on, they went into there's the room, the sarcophagus or the tomb room that has the 3 chests. And one of them is,
that killed one of my
it didn't kill
characters.
any of mine, but one of them is the one that's like the rust chest, right? You get into it and close it, and something, things get rusted up and destroyed. The only thing that got destroyed in the rust chest, because everything else is in a bag of holding, which is in another dimensional space, right? And it's not metal. So the only thing that got destroyed because it wasn't in the bag was the Lantern of Revealing. So they finally got to use it once, and now they don't have it.
Yeah, I had one player who both had one character, a long-term character, disintegrated in that box, and then another character, her other long-term character, disintegrated by the Beholder.
They
Same
used,
player.
So because they took out Withers first, they had the control gem, and they figured it out, and they took control of the Gray Slod. So they made the Gray Slod get in one of the chests. And they named him Steve. But on our roll 20, he's labeled as Steve parentheses and mad about it because he's not happy about being Steve. Right, and so they're having a blast with Steve, and Steve has mostly been like very grumpy. Like he just doesn't want to help you. He doesn't care about you. He doesn't want you to succeed. Right. And I like doing weird things. You know, Steve was given the instruction of protect that character over there. Make sure she's safe, right? In the middle of the gargoyle fight. So Steve's like, well, my best way of keeping her safe is I grapple her and then cast fly and just shoot straight up the staircase, right? Get her away from the fight. That pissed her off, which is perfect. You know, and so I'm slowly, like, you think about like these enslaved Slod, they're not always like enslaved and mad about it because they're being controlled, you know? And so slowly I'm transitioning from everything he says is just sort of, and then he does it, you know, to he's responding now with words. I mean, telepathic words because he doesn't speak any of their languages. But he's, you know, when he's given instructions, he'll oftentimes respond with, all right, boss, you know, that kind of stuff. So, which is a significant attitude improvement over just, you know? So that's going well. The monologue thing is going well. When I can think of something to do, and sometimes it works out well because I'll throw in a monologue. Like one time we're in the middle of this dungeon, and I'm like, I don't know, I need a monologue, and there's no NPCs because it's a big death trap dungeon, right? So I threw in a monologue of, you know, what's Jarl Axel doing these days back in Waterdeep, and so I threw one of those in. So and usually I have the time and to put it together. Last week I was slammed and didn't get it done, but most of the time I'm able to throw it together. And because of the nature of who I am and what I do, I usually I write it, but then I end up recording it as well. Do a little editing or whatever with it and send them that. So my time is up, and that's more or less what we've been doing in the Deep Darkness campaign. If you want me to take a few minutes over my time, I am happy to also talk about where we're at for Descent into Avernus. I've only played twice, I think, since the last time we chatted on Descent.
Where are you?
So they finished the Hellrider Crypt, and they met Olanthius.
Well, that one was pretty lame, isn't it?
I don't know.
Hey, here's a crypt with 38 rooms all labeled the same.
Well, yeah, so there's a little bit of that, but they get through it quickly and whatever. The trouble was...
Because all the rooms are the same.
The trouble was that they very much took the attitude of, well, this is a crypt, and we want to be respectful. You know, we're all Hellriders, right. They're all Hellriders, we want to be respectful. So they didn't futz with the crypt at all. And Olanthius doesn't show up until you futz with the crypt.
Right.
So, but what they did do is they found the secret room with his journals and things in it, and they figured out...
Right.
They started to figure out how to... I mean, it was literally like, well, we've been everywhere. We've seen everything. Clearly we're missing something. So they literally just went through the entire dungeon searching for secret doors until they found the other ones and figured out how to free the souls of the Hellriders from service to Zariel and destroy the stelae that have all their names on it and all that. And I decided, obviously, destroying that is futzing with the crypt enough that Olanthius shows up. So they did that. They were given the next task, which is go to these arches, which will teleport you to Costachi's Maw, where you can free him, and then he'll go after Zariel, and that'll prove your worth for me to tell you where the Bleeding Citadel is, and give the added benefit of, you know, Zariel will be busy and not watching you go to the Bleeding Citadel. And then one of the things that I've actually has gone rather well with the adventure is if you're going someplace in Avernus, because it's all mutable and changes, you roll a couple of dice. And how many dice or what dice you roll depends on how well you know where you're going. So if you just have it labeled on the map and you're going there, you roll 2 d4s. And if they come up with the same number, you don't end up where you wanted to be. You end up in some other random place. And it's actually happened quite a bit. And while they were trying to get to the arches to teleport, it happened again, and they ended up at the wrecked fortress. Which, you know, from a distance, big black metal thing sticking up out of the ground, that could be the arches. Let's go check it out, you know. And so now they're getting to that, and they're getting ready to explore the wrecked fortress. So I've liked that because one of the things I wish there was more of in the adventure is incentive to sort of explore. It's a little bit like
because you're in hell, so half
Well,
the time you get more than half the time you
right.
find terrible places.
And even the warlord thing is kind of adds some interesting things, but I wanted a little bit more guidance, I guess, into how to bring the warlords in. Exploring hell, like they ran into the Mordenkainen's tower, and they're like, well, that's not where we're trying to go. We just keep driving.
Right.
You know, they just ignore some places. And
Sure.
they, I just sort of wish there was a little bit more incentive to explore and go new places and to check out other things. Give them some more things to do in between the fetch quests or around the fetch quests. Of those two paths. I think there would be some. I think there's some value there. I don't think anybody's writing third-party supplements for this adventure anymore because it's been out for long enough. But
no, but there's a lot of good ones from the olden days.
And I have
last year.
I mean, I have the Encounters one that the Adepts put out. I have Helterel, and I use that one.
It's kind of funny that nobody has nailed, in my opinion, the encounter tables like the ones that were in the Waterdeep City encounters. Like that really hit for me the exact right resolution of how big an encounter I wanted. And they've kind of gone the other direction of like bigger encounters, like full page things. And I'm like, I don't need a full page encounter.
The ones in for Avernus almost, I don't know if I don't think they're too big. I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to add some variety. Right? They're trying to add, there's this giant pile of bones and there's some random treasure in it if you search through it, or there's some wizard doing weird weather things, and they're doing all that kind of cool, fun.
Those are the ones that are in the book, right?
Those are the ones in the supplement.
In the supplement, okay.
Yeah, and those are all good, but what they don't, and they add this interesting flavor and whatever, but they don't add meaningful, like, don't forget that Avernus is dangerous sort of encounters, Yeah. And ultimately, I guess when you're in an infernal war machine, very little is dangerous because the thing moves faster than anything else, so they just constantly go around it. And they can do so because they're faster than everything. Somebody in the chat, was it Strife Master, is asking about the random tables in Avernus. I know they have random tables for encounters in Elturel. I can't remember if there's random tables for running around in.
I mean, I used some, but I can't remember if they were in the main book or they were somewhere else. I'd have to dig it up and look.
And the supplement also has some interesting encounter chains, and I've been using those too.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. And it was the encounter chains where it's like, that's just, it was more than I needed. Right? Like, it built out stuff that I just want to have a fun encounter on the side of the road. I don't want to launch into some big thing because they've already got it.
But they had, I mean, that was like chapter 4. The first 3 chapters were all just sort of real quick, short encounters. They just weren't they were interesting encounters. They're not encounters that reinforce, hey, this place is really dangerous. You're in hell.
Right.
It's more of, hey, this place is really weird. So, anyway,
time's up.
My time is well up, but that's sort of where I'm at with my games right now.
Who was it that was supposed to be managing time? They're not doing a good job.
The person who was having
who said never mind, I'll see you later.
So anyway, before we do move on, I want to let people know that you can support us and the other Tome Show shows. One of the ways that you can do that, one of the best ways you can do that, is to become a patron at patreon.com/The Tome Show. I always forget which one it is now. And you could be patrons, like we have some new patrons. Jeff Matthews, James D'Alessio, and Derek Heath. I think I've mentioned Derek before, but I'm happy to shout people out more than once. Plus, we have our some longtime supporters like Hyperlexic, Jill Sanders, Leonard Pelche. Jester David has returned, and I'm glad to see him again. And Doug Palmer is another one of our great patrons. So yeah.
And Steal Your Mind, who is in the chat right now.
In the chat,
Mind is also a patron, yep. Okay. So, whose turn is it? Mike? Tell us about your game.
My turn? All right. I'm running. I'm deep into Rime of the Frost Maiden. It is the only adventure I'm currently running.
Ooh, that's weird for you.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, because I used to be running a Friday every other weekend game, and a friend of mine has taken that game over, so I get to play in his game, which is awesome. Because now I've got a regular campaign that I'm playing in as a player, and I'm enjoying it to death. But my Wednesday and my Sunday game are both Descendant Avarice. They're both Rime of the Frost Maiden. My Wednesday group is about 3-ish weeks ahead, 2 or 3 weeks ahead. So we're in chapter 1. They are exploring 10 towns. They started off in Bryn Shander. They did the Foaming Mugs quest there in Bryn Shander, which is actually a really good starter quest because it's basically go and kill a bunch of goblins.
Is that the one with the polar bears and the iron shipment? Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So if I were recommending, there's 2 things that I've learned from that I would do differently. One is I had a starting encounter where they ran into some ghouls that were eating a murder victim. This is full of spoilers, by the way. So they were eating one of Sefik Kaltro's murder victims. And then if you fight the ghouls, you beat them, you get level 2, and that way I could get the characters to level 2 really quickly before any of the other quests. And that way I figured the quest would be better balanced. The Foaming Mugs quest, if you ensure that the polar bears are essentially non-hostile, and you don't have the goblin boss kind of act like a coward rather than getting in people's faces and fighting them, that quest can be a really good level 1 quest. Because at that point, you're really just dealing with a bunch of goblins. And they're goblins who are not trying to ambush you. They're goblins who are busy struggling getting a cart out of a ditch. So there's a really good chance for the characters to like gang up on the goblins and trick them and fight them in sets at a time and not all of a sudden get ambushed by 12 goblins, right? So if it's run correctly, it can be a really good first level quest, which means right out of the book, you can just start them in Bryn Shander, give them that quest, they go do that quest, they come back, and then you give them 3 rumors from the rumor table, probably rumors for the towns that are nearby, right? The next couple of towns. So I ran, I think I've run, I got to look it up here, about 3 or 4 of the 10 major quests, not including the 2 starter quests. I ran Nature's Spirits, which is one of the 2 starter quests. That's the one where you have to go find Chwingas. And so that one didn't really work out particularly well because it's not really sure like what you're supposed to do when you catch one or what you do, what you learn from them. There wasn't really a conclusion. And I ended up kind of scrambling at the end to sort of give the Chwinga things to tell the characters that was valuable, like the fact that, Oral's walking around.
See, that's why I had Velen Harpel give them the quest.
Yeah.
Because really what she was doing was testing how hardy they are and if they were going to be dangerous to her, right? And she can, if she ends up being super evil, she can take those Chwingas and use them for her evil purposes because they're, they're elemental beings and whatnot. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I offered her as one of the patrons. I had 4 patrons that I offered up, and in one group they picked the woman who gives you the Nature Spirits quest. Her name is Danica. So Danica Greysteel is the main patron for my Wednesday group. My Sunday group chose Hlyn, who is the bounty hunter who's hunting Sefik. So both good. They're both good ones, right, to start with. Although when you're running around towns, you don't see them. You're not going to see your patron very often because you don't get back to town very often. Right. So one thing that I had, I think running the Bryn Shander Foaming Mug quest as a level 1 quest is fine as long as you make sure that the Goblin Boss and the polar bears aren't involved in the fight. Then that can work out really well. Then the other one, which everybody knows, is you probably don't want to have Sefik Kaltro be a villain right away. You probably want to have that be a longer quest. And I've turned it into a mystery where they saw dead people in different towns. They were all clearly murdered by Sefik.
That's what Sam did too.
But they didn't know who Sefik was.
Yeah, that's what I did.
And then they started to pick it up. It's a little hard because what are the clues? So I eventually made it pretty clear that, hey, all of these murders are in the right timeline with how Torg's merchant caravan is going around from town to town. So then they said, okay, we know that they came from Dugan's Hole to Goodmead to Bryn Shander to Targos, and now they're on their way to Tourmaline. So they then started to chase it, and they went to Targos, and they didn't spend a lot of time there, but they spent enough time to say, oh yeah, they were here a day ago, and this morning they just left for Tourmaline. So then the group's like, oh, let's go to Tourmaline. And all the time they were doing this, they're picking up the other quests, which means now they have 5 quests that they haven't yet chased down. They have a little too many. I doled them out a little too quickly to go with, and they were like, yeah, those quests are great, but we're chasing a murderer right now. Let's go find him. So they made it to Tourmaline, and the session that we had on Wednesday, they met a bunch of funny NPCs in Tourmaline. They got jumped by Zinterim bandits because they were screwing around with the wannabe mayor in Goodmead, and they passed a lot of false rumors about him to break his ability to become the next speaker. And in doing so, it pissed him off. And then he sent a flying snake up to Targos and said, some people are coming your way. Kill them on the side of the road. So 3 Zinterim thugs hired a bunch of local bandits, jumped the characters on the roadway, and said, like, yeah, you shouldn't have screwed with that guy. And then summarily got killed by the party. But and then the funny bit there is they put all of the bandits to sleep. They had a bunch of like highwaymen that were just local toughs from Targos, but there were 3 actual Zinterim agents that were there that were thugs. So they killed one of the Zinterim agents. They imprisoned the other 2. They put all of the other ones to sleep and then paid them off to take the other ones back to Targos to put them on trial. Of course, what we know is that the speaker of Targos is also a Zinterim guy, which means they're all going to get free, right? Like they're going to win the case. And next, the party will go back and go, hey, what happened to those guys? Oh yeah, well, we couldn't find good evidence, so they're free now, right? And like, are you kidding? Anyway, so now they went there, they met, what they figured out is that the murderer is killing people who have been, I think this is in the book. The murderer has been killing people who have been avoiding the sacrifices to Oral. And so they said, okay, hey, has anybody around here avoided the sacrifice to Oral? And they're like, oh yeah, there's this old cranky woman who wouldn't put her fire out when everybody else did. And they're like, okay, we're going to watch her house. So they set up like a bunch of them hanging out in front of the house, like watching. And then sure enough, here comes this dapper guy in a blue vest. And I said, like, you realize like he is way underdressed for this weather. And they're like, oh, and then there's like guards that they had stationed outside. And the guard's like, oh, hey, how's it going? He's like, hey, good. Thunk. And then they're killed by ice knives. They're like, oh, this is our guy, and then they jumped him. So our next session is going to start with them facing Sefik. But of course, in my world, Sefik can also summon ice ghouls. So all of a sudden, they won't be facing just Sefik. They'll be facing Sefik plus a bunch of ice ghouls that follow him around. So that's been a lot of fun.
That's that's one group.
Yeah, we're just going to talk about my Wednesday group because I talk about my Sunday group in my other show, and people can go listen.
And you're running 2 games right now? Okay.
Yes, Wednesday and Sunday. They're both.
Steal Your Mind wanted to know who was officially running the least amount of games here, and I think you and I are both running 2. So.
Yeah, I'm running two a week. Yeah.
I don't know what Sam's at right these days, but.
Are you running both yours weekly?
I mean, when the kids aren't in trouble and we have to cancel Descent, but. That's what happens when you run for your kids. Oh, you're misbehaving. I guess we have to take away D&D this week. I'm like, why am I getting punished?
Oh, why? Why am I punished? That sucks. So it's nice that they like it enough that it can be used as a punishment. But it's still,
Sam, how many games are you running?
I have 2 games that run every 2 weeks and 1 game that runs weekly. And one game that's sort of intermittent, runs whenever the boys have time.
So Sam is running like 2.1 games per week.
Maybe more than that, yeah. So a couple of things that I would have done differently. One is and Sam knows this, but I tried to group the 10 quests that are in the towns into like tiers, similar to the way that Dragon of Icespire Peak has quests and tiers. And, that you sort of like, here are 3 quests, you do 2 of them, the third one goes away, then you get the next set of 3 quests. And I thought that seemed like a nice way to organize it. And it turned out like that was more work than I needed to do. And it's just easier to give out 3 rumors at a time that are relating to the towns that are nearby. That said, there's a couple of quests where you definitely want to tune them. You want to have a way to tune them. And the one that came to mind is we did the one with the winter wolves. I forget the name of it. Hold Up it is. So smart winter wolves have kidnapped a couple of kids and are trying to extort the town of Dugan's Hole for food, right? But they're winter wolves. Right. Well, two winter wolves will kick your ass, right? Like they're like little white dragons. They are nasty. So it's far better to just make them dire wolves. And if you make 2 dire wolves that are smart, it works. It's significantly better balanced for combat option.
There's enough other random creatures running around that are awakened in this adventure that you could easily just make them awakened direwolves.
Well, and here's the irony. Winter wolves cannot be awakened because they are not beasts.
But they're already intelligent.
But I think direwolves are. Yeah, direwolves, I'm sure are. They're already intelligent, right. But it's nicer to have awakened direwolves because it fits the whole animals getting awakened. And they're like, hey, instead of just eating people, we could kidnap some people and extort food out of the town, right? Like we'll do that. And that's just it's something a newly awakened winter or direwolf would try to think up. The other one was like the 2 Verbeeg. We ran that quest in Good Mead. The Mead Must Flow is the name of the quest. And Verbeeg are another monster that will kick your ass. Now, luckily, my Wednesday group who ran it didn't face them at all. They managed to rout one of them, and then they ran into the other one and convinced the other one that they were taking poisoned meat away from the first one in this like convoluted, like we were going to poison it, but then we felt bad. So we came to take it away. And she's like, and then they managed to convince her to go away. And then they took off with the mead, right? They're like, let's go, So they never actually fought a Verbeeg, but I think you could probably have the group, especially if they're second level or above, they could probably face 1 Verbeeg if that Verbeeg is not getting 2 attacks around. You just limit its attacks to 1 attack around, because otherwise it'll just destroy the group. Like it does a ton of damage.
It's drunk on all that meat and just give it disadvantage on all its attacks. The math ends up about.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. So we came up with a new technique called sleepjacking, and sleepjacking is when you find a drunken ogre. And you immediately like ready your attacks and beat it down until a sleep spell will work on it. And you beat it down and it can't sleep and then run. And now it wakes up and it's all beat up and it has no idea why. Right? And its meat is gone. So so they pulled that on their thing. So I think we've done about 4 of the quests. And they, in my opinion, they all need a little tuning. Like given that you think like these quests are generally going to be 1st to 4th level, some of them are just really, really hard for that, right? And I hear like, well, the intent isn't. I would hear a lot of this. I hear the intent isn't that you fight these guys, and you're like, be nice if it said that, right? And also, why shouldn't combat be one of the options? Like combat is one of the pillars. So sure, they should be able to talk their way out of a Verbeeg fight. But that doesn't mean that other groups can't fight it, right? And maybe they'll win. I'll tell you one thing that's eating my lunch right now is we have one of the new Tasha's star sign druid clerics. What's the Twilight clerics, right? Just temp hit point machines. Oh, yeah. So it is essentially giving everybody like 5 to 8 temps a round. Oh, wow. Right? Which is this buffer of this like damage
especially
buffer,
at that
which
level.
Means that yeah, right. It's crazy. I think it goes up with proficiency. So it's not going to be very good later on. But holy cow, is it really good now? And it basically means that again, I threw how many bandits? 8 bandits and 3 thugs against 5 3rd level characters. And they didn't really have any, even the guy who had 2 thugs doing 2 attacks each with advantage. I couldn't get down. I couldn't beat him down past this threshold of temporary hit points he was getting. So it means that if I'm going to have a hard Cephalic fight, I think those ice ghouls are going to be doing a little bit of extra ice damage. So there's ways to deal with it, but it's like, boy, that's I thought the heal gun, the heal gun from the Artificers is very similar to it, but it doesn't seem. This one seems to be worse. Like it's this constant temporary hit point threshold, that's just always going. So yeah, I have I listened, if I can plug another podcast. So Sean Merwin and Teos on their podcast, and the name I always remember the old name. I don't remember the new name.
The Misdirected Mark. I don't remember.
Yeah.
It used to be Down with D&D.
It used to be Down with D&D, and they changed the name. I got it right here. Mastering Dungeons. So they just had an episode with Marcelo D. Veliquez. I suck at pronunciation. And GM Tim, if you know GM Tim, he's an awesome dude. And both of them were also, all four of them were talking about Rime of the Frost Maiden. They had lots of good things to say. And one of the things that they brought up was a continuing complaint that it's never clear. I'm going to ignore that. It's never clear exactly what the theme of the adventure is supposed to be. And it sort of gets lost. And then, like, all of a sudden, like, halfway through, a giant dragon comes and destroys half of 10 towns. And there's all these, like, and then it's like, well, then you deal with the Frost Maiden. And then somebody's like, hey, come down with me into this old city. And you're like, why? I took care of the problem. Like, why am I going to?
Well,
so there's this, like,
we've had lots of conversations about how the last two chapters don't connect to the story very well. But
yeah, right. So
that's where all the work that I'm having to do, that's where I'm doing the work. I'm not doing the work fiddling the little chapter 1 stuff. I'm doing it all for later.
Yeah. I could have done less work on chapter 1 and I would have been fine, I think. The tuning is probably what I would want to continue to do, but the whole, like, organizing of the quest and everything turned out not to be that important. I have no idea how I'm going to handle those chapters, but I know I'm not going to have the dragon come and destroy the towns. Like, that just feels lame to me. So, we're gonna have something else there, and I don't know how I'm gonna tie the three, the three chapters together. But I'm gonna find some way to make those all sort of work together.
To me, to hear you talk about their conversation about how it doesn't have a strong theme, because all of the marketing and discussion around it was about a very strong, like, isolation and horror theme.
Oh, so, it has. Well, I mean, there's theme and there's plot, and it doesn't have, or theme and story.
Yeah, so I never even got that. The horror theme never played out for me.
Look, there's a way to play that as a horror isolationist scarcity game, and that's the way I'm running it. But you have to lay that out at the very beginning, and then you really have to push on it. If you have a group or a DM or both that aren't really pushing on that, it does not come through, because there's a lot of sort of like comedy, lighthearted stuff in there.
Yeah, right.
That if that's the thing that keeps getting highlighted, there's nothing wrong with that, because you need that even if you're running like a horror isolation game, because
full of comedy.
Right. Well, and those lightness areas actually make the darker areas feel darker, right? So that's important. But if you're not playing the darkness at all, then those light areas end up being what the game is about. That ends up being the theme, is that, it's this hokey little 10 towns with a bunch of villagers, all these hokey people, they're having these problems, and you're doing all these quests with them, and most of them have to do with beer or honey, and, somebody stole the fish, and you know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't necessarily come through as a really, really, like, see, the way I'm running it, this place is in the middle of an environmentally devastating effect.
Right.
They are shut off from the rest of the world. There is a goddess running around causing complete darkness all the time, and then, showing off her giant white rock, right? Like it's really devastatingly tough for them. And I keep doing things to make my PCs get exhaustion. Right? Like, I have all these things that happen that can cause them to have exhaustion, because they are exhausted all the time, because it's such a hard place to live in. And while they do meet some nice NPCs, I have to keep pressing on the horror aspects, or else that just won't come through. It just gets lost because there's so much going on. And the second half of the book doesn't have anything really to do with any of that. Mm-hmm. So I did a lot of work to pull that back in. So not sorry to take over the conversation.
But it's already in your turn. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying, though, is that I totally appreciate their conversation, because you have to really work through that to make it happen that way, and to make all those things connected. Like, that's what I've spent all of my prep time that has been the difficult prep time. Yeah, like I tweaked some of the encounters, but that's not difficult prep anymore. The difficult prep is, how am I going to work this shit into this shit over here? Yeah. Because
I'm hoping to find an elegant, I think it's okay as I think about how I'm going to run those chapters. I think it's okay to essentially treat the whole Duergar section as just one of the other quests that's going on in chapter 2. Mm-hmm. Right? It can just be another. It doesn't have to be connected to anything else, because a lot of the other stuff isn't connected to anything else.
Yeah.
But I think the Ythrin,
yeah.
Yeah, that Ether in the city and the stuff that's going with Oral. I'd like to find a connection there. And I think the idea that whatever it is that Oral is using to keep the Endless Night going is being generated by a power that's down there and has to be shut down. That's a loose one that I'm getting in my head now. But I think if I could just find some nice, elegant way to connect those two things together and make that sort of the final chapter of the both of those places, the final chapter, I think I'll be happy with it. My group doesn't mind. I mean, I don't mind not really reinforcing the horror aspect because we just played a bunch of horror games and we're fine. I definitely the idea of like the continuing cold and that everybody's got to kind of work together. One thing, and I know you, Torog was like your big addition in your game. For me, I added the Cult of Oral. I have a group called the Children of Oral, and I treat them like the like Thulsa Doom's cult in Conan the Barbarian. They're everywhere. Right. They've managed to convince a lot of the people that they need to do this. They're the ones that are responsible for the sacrifices.
I heard there's a really good product on DM's Guild about the Cult of Oral.
So now you
exactly
pitch my product, right? That's what I'm doing too. Is the
so that was a fun. I got A. I love cults, and B. It's a fun wrapper, and a political wrapper. Like you can't just go and kill them.
Right.
You have to figure out how to dismantle them from the city, which is kind of fun. Anyway. Oh, and Moose Jaws. So my when I ask people what their stars and wishes were, my wife is like, Moose Jaws. I want to face Moose Jaws, and I'm like, Moose Jaws is coming.
That's one of the most fun quests that my players are back. They went back to the thing again. We'll talk about it when I get to my game.
It's your turn. Yeah.
First, we should let people know that there's other ways to support the show, such as going to thetomeshow.com and clicking on links to DM's Guild. Or to Amazon, hopefully, maybe. I don't know. There may be some issues going on with Amazon right now. I got an email from them this morning saying that something may be out of compliance and they're canceling our affiliate account after like 10 years. I don't know.
What?
So I messaged them back and I haven't heard anything, so we'll see. I'm appealing it, so maybe go to Amazon, maybe whatever. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's possibly, at the very least, if you're going to go buy Creed of Oral or any of these other fantastic DM's Guild things that we've talked about, go to it through the link at thetomeshow.com, because I use that to pick up PDFs and stuff that we use for our various PDF review episodes and what have you. So those people reviewing don't have to go out and spend a bunch of their own money on things. So, that's it. So, Sam, now you can have the remainder of your time.
Whatever. Okay, so last time, I'm going to talk about Rime of the Frostmaid again, okay? Because that's the tome, that's the conversation tonight, right? So, the last time we talked, we finished the session where the PCs were doing Moose Jaws, right? They were doing the Lonely Wood quest, which is the white.
The two of you keep referring to all these quests by name, and if somebody's not familiar,
I'm gonna.
Okay,
I'm gonna
if
talk
somebody's
about
not reading the adventure that we're talking about.
Yeah, okay. I'm not saying I don't trust you, Sam. I'm just saying Mike didn't talk about what the quests were.
So anyway, here's the thing. So this white moose is killing loggers, okay? And so if the PCs go to Lonely Wood, that's the first thing they hear is that the white moose, or they hear rumors or whatever, the white moose, and in my game, they heard that rumor early on because they were told by a drunk person in the tavern in Targos that the white moose killed his brother, and it's this evil creature, and it's leading all the herds away, because the guy overheard one of my PCs in the bar talking about how his tribe, because he's a redhead tribesman, his tribe is starving, and so they're going out and they're trying to figure out what's happening to their main food source, which is elk. And so all the elk herds are leaving the area and they don't know. So that's part of why he's adventuring. He's trying to end the rime because they think that's what's causing these elk herds to leave. And so he's telling the rest of the PCs in this during the first session, and some drunk patron in another table hears him and sort of says, "Hey, buddy, like I know, what's causing the herds to go away." And he's drunk and he tells the story about how the moose killed all these people up in Lonelywood, and they're not logging anymore, and it's going to destroy the town, and it killed all these people, including his brother. And he starts blubbering, right? He's crying, and then he says, "I bet the moose is leading all the herds away," and whatever. So they had this quest in their head for a long time, but they had just gotten up there. And so they went up and they did this quest. So they go to try to find this moose. And the moose is sort of holed up in this old elven tomb. And the elven tomb has sort of it has a protective magical aura on it. So usually people haven't found it because they sort of get redirected as they try to go through that area just magically, and they don't even know, right? But because the party, of course, the party is the party, and so they were tracking the moose along with a bunch of other tracks from other animals that are also going towards the elven tomb, and they go there, and that's where the moose is. Anyway, so there's a druid there that's awakening all these animals. So there's all these animals around, and so the party's like, what the heck's going on? And they figure out all the things. So they resolve this quest, and they figure out that this druid is awakening all these animals because she wants the animals to destroy Lonelywood, all the loggers in Lonelywood, because they killed her sister. And so she took the body of her sister and she stored it in one of the sarcophagi in this tomb, which of course is desecrating that tomb, but that's another story. And so she has this mirror that is able to show the moose, because she's having the moose do all the dirty work. So she's showing the moose the targets in this mirror. So she makes the mirror works if moonbeams shine on it or something. And so then it shows the target of her anger, right? And so the moose is targeting specific people, it turns out. And so the party comes in, they kill the druid, they fight with the moose, they communicate with the moose, and the moose tells them the story, what it knows about the story, and they realize, oh crap, this moose is just trying to administer justice. It's not really this weird evil creature. It's just an awakened poor moose that has been given information and acting on it. So they talk to the moose, and they find out there's one target left. Okay, because now some of this is me putting stuff in, right? So what I said was the sister was killed because either she saw the loggers doing something illegal and she was going to tell on them, or they did something to her and she was going to tell on them, or whatever. Like she knows something and they had to kill her. And the sister figured it out, and that's why she is setting off the wrath of this moose on them. Okay, so that's the basics of what's going on. The party finds it out, and so the party looks in the mirror. They figure out how to activate it, and they look in the mirror and they see the final target. This is where I ended my last Behind the DM Screen, which hasn't released on podcast yet. So if you didn't watch the last one live, that's going to be the end of my talk, the last episode. Anyway, so what happens is they see in the mirror, they see Davrick Fane, and Davrick Fane is one of the NPCs from the Legacy of the Crystal Shard D&D Next adventure, and he is in Lonelywood, and he is the last person that is supposed to be targeted by the moose. So they tell the moose, we'll go take care of him, you stay here, because if you leave, the town's going to kill you. So we're going to go show the town that you're not at fault here, and just lay low, and then they are not going to hunt you down, and we're going to go deal with Davrick Fane. So that was the end of that session. So in my last session, what they did was they came up with this really elaborate plan of having the townsfolk gather and having the ASMR PC, I have an ASMR PC, having her activate her radiant soul, which causes her to have like these ethereal wings and glowing eyes, and she can kind of fly. And then casting a light spell like on her headband, so it looks, because it's going to be dark outside, so looks like she's going to be almost like a cold light walker with light coming off of her head, and she'll be flying. So they want to have her fly into this little festival of oral that's being hosted by the local leader of the church there. Her name is Callie Teafellow. Okay, she's a halfling there that's leading the church. Now they don't know if she's a cultist or not, because the church has members that aren't cultists, and then the church has members that are cultists, and so they don't know, so they can't just openly accuse someone, right? So she's leading this sort of, they have all these ice sculptures, and the party decided to help set it up. So the party helped set up all these ice sculptures, and T-Fellow comes along and she's giving this speech, and Davrick Fane is there, and the party has the ASMR PC come out like with the radiant wings and accuse her. And so Callie T-Fellow sees the PC floating in and says, "Oh, it's an aspect of Oral that has come to bless our festival." And so everybody's like, "Oh!" And then the PC like points at Davrick Fane and says, I am not an aspect of Oral to bless you. I'm here to like doom you because of what you did to me." And so like basically all hell breaks loose, right? But what happens is when, he tries to say, "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what's going on. I've done everything in the name of Oral, and this isn't, I don't know what's happening. This is wrong. It's a lie, whatever." Nobody believes him. So when he figures out this is a real bad deal, he uses freezing breath on everybody that's in front of him, because it's a spell that goes out in a 30-foot cone. It's a spell from my Creed of Oral handout. And it turns like 8 townsfolk and one of the PCs to pillars of ice. So it just freezes them. And the spell, the way it works, if it drops you to 0, it turns you into a pillar of ice. And you're stable, but you're at 0 hit points and you're stuck in a pillar of ice. So if you're just a regular townsfolk, that's going to kill you. If you're a PC, you can be thawed out and you're surviving, right? So now there's this set of pillars of ice, and all the townspeople go, "Oh, crap," and they start running away. So there's this big mob rush away, and so they get in a fight with Davrick Fane, and they eventually defeat him. Meanwhile, as they're fighting with him, Velen Harpel shows up. And she's kind of standing back in the background with her arms crossed. She can see right through the ASMR's disguise. She knows exactly what's going on. Everything disperses. They kill Davrick Fane. They tell the townsfolk, "We're really sorry. He apparently did this horrible thing. Whatever. They go back to the speaker's house with Velen Harpel because they're staying in the speaker's attic. And so they have this big whole long conversation with her. They don't know that she's an enemy yet. They suspect it, of course, because Wizards of the Coast named her villain. But like for them, they've met her like twice before, and she gave them a small task. And so she hasn't done anything. She's now trying to convince them that she is. So they finally saw like her brooch on her collar, which has the symbol of the Arcane Brotherhood, and so they were looking into that. And basically, she tells them, "No, I'm in the Arcane Brotherhood, but I am all for the gathering of knowledge, but not for using it to destroy things. So I know that Ithrin is up here, and I know that there are members of my group that are trying to uncover it, to use it for power to destroy things, and I'm trying to stop that. I need to uncover it." But that's because I need to make sure it doesn't get used for bad things, right? Which, right? Come on. So she convinces them that she's, quote, one of the good ones, right? And they ask her for help trying to figure out what's wrong with one of the PCs who has this psi crystal that's talking to her. And here's where I've started leafing in all of these aspects, because the psi crystal is a conduit for Torog. And since the PC, the psi crystal came from Trex the Kobold in the Tourmaline mine, in that quest, they went to the mine, and Trex has found a psi crystal, and it's influencing him. In the adventure, it's a ghost that has possessed him. And so what I did was I made it actually a conduit for Torog to be able to speak to whoever attunes to it. And the Torog gives this person like the ability to speak extra languages, and they can telepathically communicate now. And the psi crystal also does what the regular functions of a psi crystal are from the back of the book. So Velen Harpel, they give her the crystal to go figure out what it is and why it's affecting their teammates so much, right? So she takes it back, and they say, "Okay, we're going to meet you back at your camp tomorrow morning." She takes the crystal. The PC they took the crystal from freaks out, and they have to tie her up, or him up, the male PC. They have to tie him up because he wants to go after it, because he's that like connected to that thing because of the things that it's told him, okay? The next morning, they get up, they go to search Davrick Fane's house, and they find that the entire bottom floor of his house, all the furniture has been removed, and the only thing in there are just stacks and stacks of firewood, and there's a humongous wood stove in there, like a giant, cast iron wood stove that's just burning, burning, burning. Just the flames are burning. The whole place is really hot, and there's a nest right on top of the wood stove, and inside of it is a perfectly round, 1.5 foot in diameter Remoraz egg. And the party flips out, and they're like, "Oh crap, this is..." So they kill it, right? And then they go search the rest of his house. Upstairs there's some furniture and a room that looks like an office. So they search that, and they find a rolled up parchment that has the Rime of the Frost Maiden on it, like the poem from the back of the book. And of course so one of the PCs finds it and then reads it out loud, and that freaks out one of the other PCs, because when she came in, she has the Midwinter Child secret, which means she was born on Midwinter. So Oral blessed her whether she wanted it or not. And when she came into the area of Icewind Dale, like at the very beginning, when she came across the spire, the mountain range, she had this vision of a woman riding a giant white rock across the sky, which of course that's Oral, and she heard these phrases in her mind, and some of the phrases were from the Rime. And so now this player is hearing these for the first time in the game, and she's like, "Oh crap, it's coming. This is going to be bad for me. Like, this is really bad." They also they found a letter that says to meet us in East Haven, and it's signed by a couple of the cultists. So now they can sort of identify some of the cultists. Anyway, so they do a few more things in town, and then they go out and they talk to Velen Harpel again. And she tells them this psi crystal is a conduit. I don't know who it's a conduit to, but it's extremely powerful. And they basically convince her she should try to dispel it. She tries to dispel it, and I rolled a 1. So it failed, and she's like, "I can't dispel it." But then they lie to the PC and say, "Oh no, it's dispelled." And of course, right at the end of that session, I had the side crystal. I had Prologue say to that PC through the crystal, "They're lying. I'm still here. I can still help you find your mother," right? Because she's looking for her. He's looking for his mom. So that's basically what happened. So here's how I'm pulling this all together. The reason the psi crystal has as a Torog conduit for me is that Velen Harpel. Okay, so the other thing that happens in the Elven Tomb is there's the pumpkin spice mummy, right? And I talked about this last time, but I'll remind you. There's a mummy in the sarcophagus in the Elven Tomb that's supposed to be like he's supposed to be watching over the tomb. And the way that they embalmed him and all that, it had a lot of spices in it, so that's why he smells like pumpkin spice. It even says that in the book, right? Like so I just refer to him as pumpkin spice mummy. When the party opened up his sarcophagus, when they finally figured out how to do that and they opened it, he sort of pops up. In the book, he's like an intelligence 5, like he's basically a zombie that can do a couple of things and not much else. I made him be an ancient Netherese wizard who eventually died. And so when he woke up, he says, "Oh, I'm used to seeing, the city up above. What happened?" And then he realizes, oh, he's been away for a long time, and he asks them what year it is. And so that's how they figured out that there's the city that is probably trying to be an Earth or whatever. And then that was before they had met back up with Velen. So they were able to put all those pieces together because he had told them and whatnot. So once they go meet up with her again, she fails to dispel the crystal, but Torog now is a part of this. So here's how this is all connected. Torog and Oral want to be together, okay? They want to support each other. I haven't decided if they're going to be like lovers or if they're just so spiteful because all the other gods exiled them, right? He got exiled into the Underdark, and she got exiled. She used to be like with Umberlee and whatever, and she got exiled because she's too cruel or whatever, and she made her way back to the mortal plane. And when she got there, she saw that Yithrin is in the glacier, and she was like, "Oh, I bet I can..." There are places in that glacial structure that have gone all the way down into the Underdark, and I can, if I release that can be, we can use the power of that city to release Torog. And so she's working to try to release Torog. That's why she's keeping everything so messed up and blocking it off from the rest of the world. And meanwhile, Torog has commandeered the Duergar to try to get them. They don't I'm not doing any of this thing where they think they're following Deep Duera and all that crap. They know it's Torog, and their job is to mess up everything so that some people can get there and unearth Ithrin and get Torog free, right? So if Yithrin gets activated, Torog gets to get set free, they think, right? Or if they can get whatever power was controlling or driving Yithrin, they can actually use that power to set Torog free or something. Like that's their goal. And that's how that's all connected. And now I've woven that in 2 or 3 sessions, how they found the Psi crystal that's a conduit for Torog talking to them. They found some symbols of Torog. They're dealing with oral cultists, and they're starting to get the picture that the cultists are not exactly, they don't really care about Torog, right? They're only about oral. And then there's this Torog thing going on, but it's somehow connected because Velen Harpel is telling them, no, this is all connected and we need to stop everything that's going on. So Velen Harpel is actually kind of turning into a good person, but of course she can turn at any point in time, right? She lied to them. She doesn't really want to get it just to make sure nothing
she can
bad
absolutely
happens.
be a good person until it behooves her not to be, until it benefits her not to be anymore.
Well, and that's the thing. So, right. So she was. I've played her pretty good, and she always had her kobold's hide, so they didn't know that they didn't even know she was a spellcaster for a long time. It's just in this last session that they realize, oh, and one of the people in Lonelywood was like, oh yeah, no, Dazan told me not to deal with Velen because she raises things. She's a necromancer. She like makes undead things, and that's really bad, and we don't want to do that. So now they've also heard the name of Dazan. Dazan is the Arcane Brotherhood wizard who's going to get killed in one of the cities if they do that quest. So I'm lacing all this in, and it's all going to make sense because if they go to the Care Koenig, which is where they're going next, that's where everybody keeps telling them to go, they're going to learn much more about Torog and how he's connected to Oral.
Yeah, I was about to ask, as you were talking about all of that and whatever, I was about to ask, because you were lacing in this knowledge of the Flying City and with the mummy and all that, and I was about to ask, okay, great, now how does this all tie to Oral and your Torog edition, or the cult of Oral, and then you went into it, and it's an interesting idea, and it's an idea that I think, even if you don't want to bring in the 4th edition deity of Torog, right? You could very easily make this a instead of Torog, make it Levistus. I think would be really interesting. Tie in is Levistus devil, archdevil, frozen in a block of solid ice, and
right.
Which ties in really well to the black ice thing that's going on. All of so.
Well, and that's the thing, is they have this cult of Levistus in there, but he's only involved in that one quest in that one town, which makes no sense to me.
But this idea of the alliance,
they threw in a cult of Levistus
makes
they threw in a cult of Levistus and not a cult of Oral. I don't understand, but like I feel like there's some things that must have been left on the drawing room floor just because of space, and they wanted to give everybody a certain amount of oomph in their adventure and whatnot, and editing stuff happens, right? Like it's the thing is, so I know that when we reviewed it, you had some pretty bad things to say about it. Mike really lambasted the beginning, like the fact that Sefik is like 3rd level and whatnot, and I was the one who said, I really like this, I'm going to run it, and it's going to work. And so far it has. I mean, I see that it has some warts, right? It has some issues, and there's some things that I've really had to work on that don't really make sense. But really, the things that don't make sense, I feel anyway, and I could be totally wrong about this, the thing for me that don't make sense is really because my preferences more than because it's really badly done. I think there are some holes, but I don't think it's really all that badly done. And I don't know.
Well, we can have that discussion.
My only complaint,
I imagine we will.
Yeah, one sentence though. My only complaint is that it's not helping you out, right? It could just use more descriptions of. There are things they say in chapter 2 that I wish they said in chapter 1, which is like these ranged in difficulty, and you're going to want to be careful. Just stuff like that.
No, for me, I think this is similar to what you're implying, Sam, is that there's a lack of cohesiveness through the whole thing, right? The things don't necessarily build to each other. You throw in a random cult here and this other thing here, and then the city is the conclusion, but it doesn't really necessarily connect to the other, and so that it doesn't tie together to a cohesive narrative, which is my biggest issue.
And so Yeah, so I want to say something about that. There's this idea that, well, that's because it's sandbox. And my point about the first two chapters was they're supposed to be really sandboxy, but sandboxy doesn't mean that none of the plot threads should connect. That's not what sandbox means. Sandbox means you've got certain things happening. The world is moving on and going to happen, and it's going to react to and respond to what the PCs do. But there are certain things that are definitely connected, and it matters what the PCs do. It's just that they have a lot of choice in it. That's the sandbox part. Sandbox doesn't mean that all the threads are disconnected and it's the DM's job to connect them. I mean, it is the DM's job to connect them.
But they can
but
help
in terms of, I think Mike's complaint is, look, I just paid $50 for this book, and it's not connecting the threads for me when it could. Out. Right, with just a few sentences in certain places, it could connect these threads, right? And it doesn't do that. And that goes back to what I always say whenever we talk about how good or bad the hardback adventures are. I say, look, none of them are written for beginning DMs. And so that's kind of a cop-out statement, because that's the way to say, well, I don't have to, the DM should be skilled enough to connect those threads based on what their party does. Yeah. And I don't know how valid that is.
How about take out 3 sentences about incest towns and turn those into sentences about how to help run the adventure?
I know. I don't like the incest town thing, but I'm just saying, right? That's, and here's what I've said this to Brandis on the when we did the DMGs for the edition wars, for the Christmas edition wars, and that is that I wish that they would write an adventure and give some space to sidebars where they would tell you, look, you can play this really deep and dark and horror filled by doing these 3 things, or you can play this not as much that way if you want to go on the lighter side by doing it this way, or the designer put this thing in here because you might want to focus on this kind of theme. Or you could do this. And those sidebars, if you just, I'm not talking about sidebars that take up a half a page. I'm talking about true sidebars just to give ideas about, if the party does this or says this or wants to investigate this, here's a way to do it, right? Like, they could do more of that, and that would make all of their adventures. This isn't about Rhyme. This is about all of their hardback adventures. It would make all their hardback adventures much more new DM friendly. And I know that there's a tendency to say, well, you got to learn by doing. But look, D&D is so popular, it earned more than all the other Hasbro, right? Like, Wizards earned more than Hasbro's other toy lines, right? We just found this out. So here's the thing. We are bringing in so many new D&D players. Why aren't we teaching them how to play with the Wizards of the Coast adventures? I don't understand that.
Here's the thing, and this, because I'm an educator, right? And I'm in education. I'm not just an educator, but I'm an educator of education people. And there is a way of thinking about education and teaching. And, they teach all these methods of, well, if you have students who are struggling readers or who English is a second language or whatever, here are some methods that you can use to help those students. And all of your other students will benefit from those methods too. So in many ways, it's just good practice. It's just good things to do. And I think there's some truth to that with this too. Like, you're not just helping the new DMs. You're adding a level of transparency that helps the advanced DMs to make it really clear, like, these are the dials you can turn. These are the ways you can change things, or these are the ways you can support yourself, or support your game or your players or whatever, right? And so it would make it more new DM friendly. But I think it would make it better for me as a very experienced DM too. So,
yeah. The problem with it is, it would mean they have to actually write shorter adventures because they're going to need more space for those types of tips and tools.
I don't know, man. They pad it out like both Descent into Avernus and Waterdeep Dragon Heist is like 50% setting. That's true. Right? And they had tons of room. Like, Waterdeep Dragon Heist is a 200 page adventure for 5 levels.
Well, and right. What's more, Waterdeep Dragon Heist is 50% setting, but at least the entire adventure takes place in that setting. Baldur's Gate
Yeah, right,
Descent into
Baldur's Gate.
Avernus, like it's 50% Baldur's Gate, and you spend 3 levels there.
Yeah.
It was really shoveled in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and one thing that like I'm glad that I'm running it, and I'm glad I'm seeing it, because like I overestimated how much I needed to do to fix it, when it turned out that actually, like, on its own, it's actually working pretty well, mostly in that area of like, how do you organize the quests? I always felt like, look, you're throwing 12 quests at me, help me out with which quests I should use.
Right.
And the truth is, like, you probably don't need to do that too much. Some guidance to say, like, you probably don't want to throw more than 3 quests out at a time.
On the other hand, there is I forget who it is off the top of my head, but there is a publisher that's very successful on DM's Guild, and their big product is, let me give you a little PDF per chapter of every book, of every adventure, to tell you how to run it and give you all the tips and tricks. And like, that's a whole product line. And it,
I think that's Power Score. And really good. It's the Cliff Notes of Adventures. Yeah, yeah, they're excellent. Yeah.
And then they bundle them all together, and you can get all the bundles with all this other stuff. I haven't picked it up yet for Descent into Avernus, but I've after running half of it for my kids, I'm like, I really should, pick it up. And so, but, and that's the kind of, like, if Wizards was really adding that support, that stuff would have a little less value. But
yeah, but would it though? I mean,
maybe
here's
it
the
wouldn't.
thing,
Maybe it's
right?
fine.
Like it would be nice to have some official support that way, because we're not getting another DMG, right? What we're getting are Xanathar's guides and Tasha's guides, and we're getting things like Mordenkainen's and Volo's, right? So we're getting creature books, and we're getting like the guides to everything, right?
Yeah, and sort of creature setting half books, like Van Richten's guide. Yeah,
right. And so those guides to everything, those are the sort of those are like the DMGs, right? Those are the additional rules, modules, and stuff,
plus a bunch
of
other stuff, but
and right, plus a lot of other stuff packed in there and whatnot. So we're not really getting that adventure running advice. What we're getting is extra rules modules to tinker with the game and play with the game and all that stuff. But we don't get it. I really, really, really think it needs to be in the adventure.
No, I agree.
Yeah, I would be all over that. I think it could definitely use. I love that idea of just little sidebars that. Again, like I mean, like, I'll figure it out, but like, do I really need to sit and spend a lot of work figuring out this thing that I just paid all this money for? Right. When a little thing saying, "Hey, you probably don't want to run Cephik at first level," right? It would take no time at all.
They explicitly tell you to run it at first level, and in fairness, I play tested a Cephik at first level as written, and they made it. Nobody died.
Man,
dropped a couple of people, but they made it. It can be done.
He is so brutal. 20
but I really think though that could change things for them if they, and I'm not saying they should do it necessarily to every book, but for me, I'm usually a home brewer anyway, right? I usually run homebrew stuff. I don't usually run the published modules. But that's one of the reasons, is if I look at it and I'm going to have to make a bunch of changes, I might as well just run my own homebrew,
Yeah, right. That's right. And I don't feel that way. Like, I can say, having just run a big ass homebrew campaign in Eberron, even then I still had all this Eberron material to work with. Right. I'm doing a lot less work with Frost Maiden. Like, it's real easy me, and it's a lot less stress, because it's like, I'm running a game on Sunday, and I'm not worried about it at all. Now, it's easy for me to put it together.
This has been a really meaningful conversation. In many ways, I've talked about when we switched our format for reviews to do like first impressions right after something comes out, and then come back and revisit it later if necessary. And suddenly I find that we're doing that here in Behind the DM Screen, which is fun.
Well, we happen to
because you're running those adventures.
The 3 of us are running
it works out really well.
Right.
That's.
I think that our the podcast blog community could do a better job of reviewing adventures after we've run them a year later.
And that's something I'd like to do.
We all get stuck on the hype train, and we all like buy it as fast as we can and talk about it as fast as we can, and none of us have any, including me, have no idea what this thing is actually like.
That's the reasoning behind my trying to do. Like, I want to do the first impression thing because there's a lot of pressure out there. Like, you're gonna get more attention. You're not necessarily gonna do a better job, but you're gonna get more attention putting something out quickly than you are putting something out that's really good and well thought out after you've run it a year or two later.
I would.
Well, that's my experience.
That hasn't been true in my experience. In my experience, I write art like my Horde of the Dragon Queen article getting more hits now than it did when I put it out.
Good.
Like it gets a lot of people playing.
So that's the reasoning behind my trying to do both. I'm trying to try out like let's do a quick, like, it came out this week, let's talk about it, just our first impressions. And honestly, they're probably about as good as the reviews that we were doing a month after it came out. But then I want to be able to, when something comes up like this, when I'm done running Descent into Avernus, I want to get together a bunch of people that have actually run Descent into Avernus and then like re-review it or re-review Waterdeep Dragon Heist, because I was super hyped about Waterdeep Dragon Heist and it played really well, but it had more warts in it than I thought it did until I started running it.
Yeah, and people like Enrique said it's the new starter set adventure, and then ran it and like, no, it's not.
Yeah,
it changed its mind.
So I think there's going to be some value in that, but we haven't done one of the sort of deep dives after it's been run episodes yet because we haven't been doing it long enough. So we'll see how it goes. In any case, we each talk for 15 minutes, and it's now been 80 minutes because that's what 15 plus 15 plus 15 adds up to,
how it works. Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's all because Darger wasn't here to keep our on.
He's supposed to mock us and make fun of us for going over our time. So I think after an hour and 20 minutes long, it's probably time to wrap up the episode if that's cool. I think we got into some really good conversation and some really good, I think it's interesting how much we all have very different takes on a lot of published materials, but I think we all came to like the exact same conclusion with how things could be better here. And I think that's interesting from three DMs that have very similar perspectives on life. So I think we're going to call that the end of the episode. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I don't know. What do I usually say at the end? I feel like there's usually something besides say goodnight, guys. I don't know. Check us out. You can email the show at thetomeshow@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Squatch. Mike is...
at Slyflourish.
Sam...
Slyflourish.com.
Sam is...
at DM
those
Samuel.
Of you watching this on the stream on Twitch can see those handles right there on the screen. You can find the show at The Tome Show on Twitter, and that's where we're going to stop things. Goodbye. Say goodbye, guys. That's how it was. All right. I have stopped the recording. If you want to say goodbye to the stream, it looks like you're all you have in the chat.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
Goodbye, Twitch folks. Thank you.
Bye, Twitch.
Thank you for hanging out. Come to the Twitch channel on Slyflourish on Sunday.